Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of the beta ask and why your need to justify your value is actively killing your launch.
Yeah, and we're stepping right into the room with you today. We're functioning as, your internal strategy partners.
Exactly. We're looking at your launch plan, we're looking at your copy.
But more importantly, we're looking at the psychology that's actually driving the execution of this rollout.
Right, because we're going to tear down a very specific and honestly incredibly common failure point. We see this constantly when entrepreneurs introduce a new offer to their inner circle.
Oh, all the time. It's this overwhelming, almost magnetic compulsion to over-explain, to over-justify.
Yeah, and ultimately, sabotage the perceived value of what you've actually built.
Which means we need to fundamentally shift the paradigm you're operating under right now.
I agree.
The central argument we're working with today is that the value of your offer exists entirely independent of a transaction, like prior to any transaction.
So meaning the value is already there.
Exactly. The success of your beta ask, it doesn't hinge on tweaking the deliverables or, rearranging the modules at the last second.
Or manipulating the price point at the 11th hour.
Right. It hinges entirely on a radical structural shift in your own internal belief system as the seller.
Which is huge, because if you're going to your inner circle...
And these are the people who already know you, right? They already have a baseline level of trust in you.
Yes, exactly. The mechanics of how you invite them in, it requires a completely different energetic posture than, say, a standard cold traffic sales pitch.
Absolutely.
But let's establish exactly what we mean by a beta ask before we go any further. Context is everything here.
Yeah, let's define it so we're all on the same page.
A beta ask isn't you just shouting into the void of social media hoping a stranger clicks a link.
Right, no. You are going to your warm audience.
Your past clients, your email list.
Yeah.
The people who have, consumed your free content for months.
And you're offering them the first iteration of something, maybe a new framework, a new software tool, or a new coaching container.
Right. The relationship is already warm. You aren't trying to convince them that you're a legitimate business entity.
They already know you are.
But paradoxically, this is exactly where we see the most intense panic from sellers.
It is, because the stakes feel incredibly personal.
Which leads us directly into what we call the false symptom of pricing.
Yeah, let's look at a scenario that plays out in almost every beta launch we audit.
Oh, the 48-hour panic.
Exactly. A client builds an incredible program. They map out the curriculum, they build the portal.
They set the price at, let's say, $2,000.
Right, $2,000. And they know, logically, the outcome they are delivering is worth 10 times that.
But then, 48 hours before the emails are scheduled to actually go out, the panic sets in.
They look at the price tag, their chest gets tight, and they drop it to $1,500.
And then a day later, they add an early bird coupon, right?
Yep. Brings it down to $1,000.
And by the time they actually hit send on the launch, they are essentially just giving it away.
Driven completely by this deep-seated fear that people won't see the value.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because repeatedly dropping the price like that, it's like noticing a leak in your boat and trying to fix it by throwing your cargo overboard.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. You aren't fixing the hole in the boat. You're just devaluing what you're actually carrying.
You're just throwing your best stuff into the ocean.
It's like having pocket aces in Texas. Hold 'em, but your hands are shaking so badly when you push your chips in that everyone assumes you're bluffing with a pair of twos.
Oh, yeah. The cards in your hand, your actual deliverables, the modules, the coaching, they are premium. They are undeniable.
But your physical transmission of doubt makes everyone fold.
Exactly. Because they aren't rejecting your cards, they're rejecting your shaking hands.
That is exactly it. They're rejecting the erratic behavior.
And that analogy isolates the exact mechanical failure here. Because buyers are incredibly sophisticated pattern matchers.
Very true.
Let's break down exactly why entrepreneurs immediately attack their own pricing structure the second they feel that internal resistance.
Why is price always the first victim?
Well, when you're sitting there staring at your launch sequence and that wave of imposter syndrome hits you,
And it always does.
it always does, your brain desperately looks for the easiest variable to control.
Because you can't control the market.
Right. You can't instantly control macroeconomic conditions. You can't control your audience's inbox clutter.
But you can log into Stripe and change the number on the checkout page.
It takes 10 seconds. And the flawed assumption there is that a lower price removes friction.
You tell yourself, oh, if I just make it cheaper, it's a no-brainer.
They won't have to think about it. and therefore I won't have to face the potential rejection of them saying no to the real value.
Wow. So you're trying to engineer a scenario where rejection is essentially impossible.
That's the goal of the panic, yes. But the friction you're sensing isn't the price.
The friction is the absence of your own conviction.
Absolutely.
Right.
And by constantly adjusting that price downward, you aren't signaling generosity to the buyer.
No, you are broadcasting distress.
Let's look at this through the lens of behavioral economics for a second.
Okay.
There's a well-known concept called the market for lemons. It was originally applied to the used car market by the economist George Akerlof.
Right, the lemon car.
Yeah, it essentially states that if a buyer has less information about the quality of a product than the seller does, they'll rely on external signals to determine its quality.
And price is the loudest signal.
The loudest. So if a seller is way too eager to drop the price of a car, the buyer instantly assumes there is hidden damage.
They assume it's a lemon.
Exactly. And the same neurological mechanism applies to your digital product or your consulting offer.
It's the exact same threat detection.
If you come to me and say, this transformation is $2,000, and then 2 days later your email says, actually, I'll do it for $1,000.
And then a day later, hey, beta special, $500 plus 3 extra hours of my one-on-one time.
Right. My brain doesn't register a bargain. My brain registers a lemon.
You start wondering what's wrong with it.
I immediately think, what is structurally defective about this program that they are so desperate to offload it to me?
You're triggering their threat response, not their buying impulse.
They literally smell the blood in the water.
You've effectively trained them to wait and see how low you'll go. Or worse, you've convinced them that the product lacks any real substance.
You are actively eroding trust in real time, all under the guise of trying to make the purchase, easier for them.
And in a beta ask, trust is the only currency that actually matters.
Because when you're asking your inner circle to test something new, they are buying into your leadership.
Right, they're buying into the outcome you're promising, knowing full well that the delivery mechanism might have a few bugs.
It's a beta. It's supposed to have bugs. But if you demonstrate that you don't even trust your own pricing, you shatter your credibility as a leader right out of the gate.
You introduce a massive variable of instability.
Which forces us to look past the symptom and diagnose the actual disease.
Because the issue was not the offer.
The issue is never the offer, or the deliverables, or the tech stack, or the market timing.
Right. If the problem isn't the offer and it's not the price point, we have to look at the internal operating system of the seller.
We have to.
When you trace all of these symptoms back to their root, the constant discounting, the panicked late-night copy changes.
It boils down to one simple, uncomfortable thing.
Worthiness.
It was worthiness. We are shifting entirely from the external metric of pricing to the internal state of worthiness.
Okay, let's dig into that.
There is a profound principle we need to anchor here, and it's this. Your offer holds value even before someone buys it.
Even before someone buys it.
Yes. We need to interrogate how you, as the entrepreneur listening to this right now, are currently linking your self-worth to the immediate validation of a transaction.
Which is so common, it's almost the default setting.
We have this culturally ingrained, highly toxic habit of believing that a product, a service, or an idea only becomes valuable the exact millisecond a credit card is processed.
Yeah. We treat the transaction as the creator of value.
Rather than what it actually is, which is just a simple exchange of pre-existing value.
We act like the offer is a ghost, like it doesn't exist in the physical realm until Stripe sends that little notification to our phone.
And only then do we exhale and say, okay, it's real, it's valuable.
But before that notification, it's just error to us.
Think about it. You build a comprehensive framework. You distill 10 years of your hard-won expertise into a beta program.
10 years of literal trial and error.
And, objectively, that it can generate massive results for the right person.
Right.
But because nobody has handed you money for it yet today, you treat it as if its intrinsic value is zero.
Wow.
You let the pending transaction dictate the reality of the asset. And we have to force a separation here.
We have to.
If you've engineered a solution to a problem, that solution has worth right now.
Right now.
It has worth sitting on your hard drive in your Google Docs before you've sent a single email.
When you fail to internalize that pre-existing value, you step into the launch operating from a massive deficit.
A huge deficit.
You are essentially asking the buyer to validate the offer's existence, rather than inviting the buyer to benefit from its established reality.
And buyers can feel that desperation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but let me push back a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I can hear the highly analytical, logic-driven entrepreneur listening to this and, rolling their eyes a bit.
Fair enough.
Let's say I'm selling a B2B software tool. It objectively automates a workflow and saves a business $10,000 a month in labor costs.
Okay, clear ROI.
Very clear. And I'm charging $1,000 for the beta. The math is the math. It's a 10x ROI.
Sure.
If the product's features are undeniably good, shouldn't those features speak for themselves? Why does my internal squishy feeling of worthiness actually matter to a purely logical CFO making a purchasing decision?
It's a great question.
If the engine works, who cares how the mechanic feels about it?
It's the right pushback, but it fundamentally misunderstands how human beings process information to make decisions.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at the neuroscience of trust for a second. Buying is not a purely logical act, even in high-stakes B2B environments.
Even for the CFO.
Even for the CFO. It is a highly emotional, deeply neurological process driven by what Daniel Kahneman calls System 1 thinking.
System 1, right, the fast brain.
Exactly. Our fast, instinctual, emotional brain. We only use System 2, our slow, logical, analytical brain after the fact, to justify the decision we've already instinctively made.
Oh.
Buyers are incredibly sensitive to the energy, the subtext, and the micro cues of your pitch.
Because when you trust the worth of what you sell, others can feel it.
And when you don't, they feel that too. You aren't just transmitting data about features and ROI, you are transmitting your relationship to that data.
So you're saying that if my System 1 brain detects a threat, my System 2 brain never even boots up to look at the math.
And never even boots up.
The CFO never gets to the spreadsheet because their instinctual brain has already rejected the interaction based on my behavioral cues.
Precisely. Let's talk about mirror neurons.
Okay.
These are the neurons in our brain that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that same action.
So they're like the empathy center.
They are the biological basis for empathy and intuition. When there is lack of worthiness in the seller, it creates a literal vacuum of confidence in the interaction.
A vacuum.
Yes. You might be listing out incredible features on your sales page or in your email, but your tone, your pacing, your defensive linguistic structures,
The frantic need to stack irrelevant bonuses to, sweeten the deal.
all of those behavioral cues broadcast doubt, and the buyer's mirror neurons pick up on that doubt instantly.
Because human beings are biologically wired to detect uncertainty as a survival mechanism.
Exactly. If the person leading me into a dark cave seems unsure of the ground we're standing on, my nervous system triggers an alarm telling me to step back.
It's just survival.
The buyer inevitably feels that vacuum of confidence. And they rarely articulate it as, I sense a lack of worthiness in the seller.
No, they never say that.
They'll just say, I need to think about it.
Or the timing isn't right, or we don't have the budget this quarter. But what they are actually reacting to is the severe cognitive dissonance between the logical 10x ROI you're claiming and the energetic doubt your words are projecting.
Wow. They're reading the subtext.
Always.
And if you don't believe your own pitch down to your bones, they certainly aren't going to risk their capital or their reputation to find out why.
Absolutely not.
That completely changes the landscape of a launch. So if we know that a lack of self-perceived worthiness is the silent killer here, we need to talk about how this internal doubt actually manifests in our external communication with the inner circle.
It manifests as a very specific communication trap.
What does this look like in the trenches? Like when our listener sits down to write the copy or film the video for their beta.
It's the slide from stating value into the desperate attempt to persuade. Stating versus persuading.
When you doubt your value, you invariably explain more than necessary.
Which is such a huge trap.
This is where the internal deficit becomes a highly visible liability.
So what does this all mean for the listener's actual copy? Where is the exact line between effectively explaining your beta ask and defensively over-explaining it out of doubt?
Well, the linguistics of over-explaining are fascinating. This is the trap where we confuse word count with value demonstration.
Yes. Let's workshop this because I see it in almost every draft we review.
Well, constantly.
The entrepreneur thinks, if I just add one more paragraph, one more bulleted list of features, one more heavily bolded section, preemptively answering an objection nobody actually raised, I'll finally tip the scales.
But structurally, over-explaining is an act of defense.
And defending implies there is an attack, or at the very least, a recognized weakness.
Exactly. Because value does not need defending.
Say that again.
Value does not need defending. Let's analyze the mechanics of a defensive email. When you write a 2,000-word email, for a beta ask. To people who already know and follow you, you aren't educating them.
No.
You're defending yourself against their anticipated rejection. You are building a fortress of words because you feel entirely exposed.
Justification isn't inherently an argumentative stance, isn't it?
It is. It assumes the buyer starts from a position of hostility or severe disbelief, and you must bludgeon them into agreement with an avalanche of reasoning.
Okay, let's do a side-by-side comparison.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the classic persuasion pitch versus a stating pitch. Let's say our listener is launching a high-ticket beta consulting offer.
Okay.
The persuasion email usually starts with a massive linguistic hedge. Something like, I know things are crazy right now, and I know this is a significant investment, but I really think this program could help you because I've spent 6 months building it.
Stop right there and analyze the micro cues.
Yeah, tear that apart.
I know this is a significant investment. You are preemptively validating their financial objection before they've even had a chance to consider the value.
You're literally putting the objection in their head.
I really think
Yeah.
a massive qualifier that completely undermines your authority.
It's so weak.
Because I've spent 6 months building it. You are attempting to justify the price based on your labor, not their outcome.
And the buyer doesn't care about your sweat equity.
They don't.
Mhm.
They care about their transformation. Every phrase in that example is steeped in the energy of persuasion.
Because persuasion is an attempt to alter someone's belief through sheer force of argument.
It's pushing. It's friction. It is fundamentally manipulative because it requires you to actively wrestle the buyer's perceived objections to the ground.
And when you try to persuade your inner circle, it breeds immediate skepticism.
They feel the pressure, they feel the hustle, and their defensive walls shoot up.
It's exhausting just listening to it.
It is exhausting to read, too.
So how do we mechanically separate persuasion from stating? What does the stating version of that exact same offer look like?
Stating relies on undeniable facts and the laws of gravity. Value does not come from persuasion.
Well, what does stating sound like?
It is completely devoid of friction. The stating version sounds like this. For the last 6 months, I have been engineering a mechanism to solve this specific supply chain bottleneck. The beta cohort opens Tuesday. We are taking 5 companies. The objective is to reduce overhead by 15% in 90 days. The investment is $5,000. Reply to this email to secure your spot.
The contrast is staggering.
Isn't it?
There's no apology. There's no pleading.
None.
It's the difference between a defense attorney desperately pleading with a jury, sweating, pacing, begging them to ignore a piece of evidence, versus an expert witness simply sitting calmly on the stand stating the chemical composition of a substance.
That's a perfect analogy. One is anxious and highly reactive.
And the other is calm, immovable, and authoritative.
Stating is presenting the truth of the impact plainly, allowing clarity to speak for itself.
Allowing clarity to speak for itself. I love that.
When you are stating, you are outlining reality. Here is the problem you have. Here is the mechanism I built. Here are the concrete outcomes this mechanism creates. You are invited to join.
There's no desperate justification of why the price is what it is.
No. You transition from being a salesperson trying to extract a yes to being a leader offering an opportunity.
You are no longer defending your worth. You are simply illuminating a path.
Exactly.
I want to take this a step further and look at how this plays out in the dreaded FAQ section of a launch page.
Oh, the FAQs, yes.
Because the FAQ is where the persuasion trap usually runs wild.
It really is.
An entrepreneur will invent 10 objections they are terrified of, like, what if I don't have enough time? Or what if I've tried other programs before?
And then they write entire essays trying to persuade the buyer out of their own hypothetical anxiety.
They end up introducing doubts the buyer never even had.
That is a perfect example of defensive architecture. A masterful FAQ section doesn't argue with phantom anxieties.
What does it do?
It simply states operational facts. When are the calls? Tuesdays at noon. Is there a payment plan? Yes, 2 installments.
It doesn't use the FAQ to repitch the product.
Never. It lets the value stand. Your offer holds worth because of the outcomes it creates, not because of how much you justify it.
Okay, so if we strip away all those persuasive tactics.
Pleading the hedging.
Right. If we delete the paragraphs of over-justification, the invented FAQs, the desperate attempts to prove our worth through sheer word count, what is actually left to connect the buyer to the offer?
That's the core question.
What bridges the gap between them sitting at their computer and them deciding to enter their credit card?
What remains is the most powerful psychological lever in business: Certainty.
Certainty.
Certainty is the necessary bridge the buyer must cross to reach a purchasing decision.
Let's dissect this bridge, because we know from the source material that certainty communicates worth.
It's the ultimate communicator of worth.
But let's map this onto the very specific, vulnerable mechanics of the beta ask.
Okay.
Because a beta rollout is unique. By definition, you are inviting an inner circle to test something new. The product itself is in its infancy.
It's like raw.
It's unpolished. Maybe the videos are recorded on a webcam instead of in a studio. Maybe the portal navigation is slightly clunky.
The product is beta.
The product might be beta, but your belief in the outcome absolutely cannot be.
That distinction is paramount.
Yeah.
You are not asking your inner circle to buy a flawless, finished, highly polished commodity.
No.
You're asking them to co-create an outcome alongside you. They know it's a beta. You've told them it's a beta.
They opted into a beta.
They are perfectly okay with the imperfections of the delivery mechanism, provided they are absolutely certain about your capability to guide them to the destination.
That makes so much sense.
If you show up with a beta product and beta conviction, the entire proposition collapses.
The buyer needs an anchor.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the product is fluid, the leader must be solid rock.
Certainty is the vehicle that communicates the worth of the unfinished product.
It's like hiring a mountain guide.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Imagine you're hiring a mountain guide. You're at base camp. You're looking up at a completely unmapped, slightly treacherous route to the summit.
It's a beta trail.
It's a beta trail.
Yeah.
Now, if your guide is constantly checking their map, pacing around, sweating,
over-explaining their credentials to you.
Right, preemptively apologizing for the altitude, and offering you a discount because the weather looks a little cloudy.
What happens?
Your amygdala screams at you to run. You panic. You do not step onto that mountain. You turn around and go back to the lodge.
You're out.
But if the guy looks at the mountain, looks back at you, and simply points and states, "Watch your step," the summit is right there.
You follow them.
You follow them across the bridge without a second thought.
You don't care if their boots are scuffed or if their jacket is patched?
No. You aren't buying the polish of their gear.
You are buying their absolute, unwavering certainty that they know the way up the mountain. Certainty is the bridge.
That is the dynamic of the beta ask distilled to its absolute essence.
Let's point back to the micro story of the client who kept dropping their prices.
Oh, right. What actually changed for them?
Value did not change. Belief did.
The guide didn't change the mountain.
Exactly. They didn't flatten the terrain or alter the weather. They changed their posture.
Removing the frantic justification and replacing it with pure, unadulterated certainty fundamentally alters the buyer's neurological response.
It drastically lowers their threat detection. It fosters immediate trust, which leads to clear, unencumbered decisions.
That sounds incredibly powerful. It sounds like the ultimate leverage point.
Because it is.
But here is the brutal reality check for the listener looking at their launch plan today.
Okay, let's ground it.
Certainty sounds great in theory, but you can't just fake it.
No, you really can't.
The market has a highly sophisticated, highly tuned radar for counterfeit confidence.
They can spot faux certainty a mile away.
You can't just stand in front of the mirror, yell affirmations, pound your chest, and magically manufacture deep structural certainty if you don't actually believe the framework works.
It's impossible.
So how does an entrepreneur mechanically build this certainty when prepping for their launch? How do we transition this from a fascinating psychological theory into tactical implementation?
We do it through an evidence-based approach.
Okay, break that down.
Notice the deliberate use of the word unearthing, not manufacturing. Certainty isn't something you conjure out of thin air.
It's not a mindset hack.
No, it is a logical conclusion drawn from hard evidence. The client in our earlier scenario, the one who kept dropping their prices, they didn't just wake up one morning and magically become confident.
So what did they do?
We forced them to look at the historical data. We reviewed the actual results their methodology had already helped create in the past, even in unpolished forms.
The actual impact.
The impact was undeniably real. We saw confidence shifts in their clients. We saw clear decisions being made. We saw real measurable progress.
So certainty isn't manufactured. It's unearthed through evidence.
Exactly. We are talking about actively auditing your own competence.
Which means pivoting your focus from what your product is to the concrete results it produces.
Yes.
Let me ask the listener directly. What stands out to you about the difference between talking about what your product is versus the outcomes it creates?
It changes everything. The exact homework we assign to combat this lack of worthiness is highly specific.
What is the step-by-step for the listener right now?
If you are caught in the over-explaining trap, you need to close your draft email. Open a blank document. List 3 real outcomes your offer helps create and speak from that truth.
Grounding your language in outcomes anchors your sense of worthiness in empirical reality.
And it completely eliminates the urge to defend or discount the price.
Let's workshop this right now because listing outcomes sounds easy until you actually try to sit down and do it.
It's harder than it sounds.
Let's look at how people usually get this wrong and how to fix it. Let's imagine our listener is an executive burnout coach.
Okay, doing a beta launch of a group program.
Right. They sit down to write their 3 outcomes. Usually they write something vague like, Outcome 1, you'll feel less stressed.
Okay.
Outcome 2, you'll have better work-life balance. Outcome 3, you'll find your purpose.
See, those aren't outcomes.
What are they?
Those are platitudes. They were entirely subjective, unmeasurable, and they lack any real gravitational pull.
If you build your launch around feeling less stressed, you will inevitably feel the need to drop your price.
Because deep down, you know that's a weak promise. You aren't certain of it yourself.
Okay, so let's rebuild those outcomes using the evidence-based approach. Let's dig into what the coach's framework actually does.
Let's look at the data. We push the coach to analyze their past one-on-one clients who use this same methodology.
And we find out that their clients don't just feel less stressed.
Right, what do they actually do?
They actually stop working on weekends.
Boom. So outcome 1 becomes, you will completely eliminate weekend email checking within 14 days, reclaiming 48 hours of uninterrupted personal time.
Look at the certainty in that statement.
It's undeniable. Let's tackle the better work-life balance platitude. What does that actually mean mechanically?
We dig into the data and realize the coach helps executives delegate effectively.
So outcome 2 becomes, you will remove yourself from 3 weekly recurring meetings by implementing our delegation matrix, saving you 4 hours of administrative drag every week.
So specific. And for the third, finding your purpose, we look at the actual result. Outcome 3 becomes, you will define a clear 1-page strategic priority filter that allows you to confidently say no to out-of-scope projects without damaging professional relationships.
Now compare those 2 lists.
It's night and day.
If you are selling the first, listless stress, better balance,
Yeah.
you're going to use persuasion.
You have to.
You're going to write defensive, flowery copy, trying to convince people that it's worth the money.
But if you are selling the second list, reclaiming 48 hours of weekend time, saving 4 hours of meetings, and implementing a strategic priority filter,
You don't need to persuade anyone. You simply state the outcomes.
it completely re-engineers the energetic exchange of the sale.
It does. It's no longer about whether you, the creator, are good enough in some abstract emotional sense.
It's about the undeniable fact that mechanism A produces result B.
And when you speak from that truth, the need to defend completely evaporates. You aren't defending your soul. You are simply stating the physics of your framework.
And when you do that, the compulsion to discount the price disappears.
Because the price is simply the objective tool required to access the outcome.
You build the offer, you align it with the concrete evidence of its impact, and then you let it stand.
You do not apologize for it. You do not write a 10-page email over-explaining it.
You do not slice the price in half 48 hours before launch.
You present the bridge of certainty,
Yeah.
and you simply invite the right people to walk across it.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up this session today.
Okay?
We've spent this entire time dissecting the mechanics of the beta ask, a very specific high-stakes moment in your business life cycle. But think about the broader systemic implications of what we've uncovered today.
The ripple effects.
If shifting your internal posture from justifying to stating completely transforms the conversion rate, the pricing integrity, and the energy of a high-stakes launch.
What happens when you apply this radical, unapologetic certainty to every single email, meeting, and interaction in your business?
Exactly. What happens to your daily emails, your client onboarding calls, your networking conversations, when you completely eradicate the defense mechanism of over-explaining and simply let your value stand?
Think about the sheer amount of time, energy, and revenue you recover when you stop apologizing for the space you occupy in the market.
That is where the real leverage is found.
If you're ready to invite your inner circle with certainty, visit 365 Freedom online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.